More perspective on China's economy. I'm joined live via Skype by Liang, Professor of Economics at Willamette University. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Rochelle.
So with the conference reviewing 2020 and looking ahead to 2021, what were the key takeaways from the communiqué?
Right, so the communiqué basically talked about 8 central tasks, and among them, I think the top priorities are to strengthen the strategic technological innovations to ensure the supply chain control and to boost domestic demand, along with improving basic living standards, cut carbon emission, and reduce the financial vulnerability, and also ensure grain and energy independence and security. So all these are very important to the end of fostering this high quality growth.
And obviously this is happening amid the backdrop of a very strange year. So how much impact did COVID have on this year's meeting and the priorities?
Right. So the impacts of pandemic is really, very important, right? When the government is thinking about going forward. So with that, one thing is public health and how to strengthening domestic demand when you have external, demand that is very much suppressed, as many other countries are still struggling with the pandemic. Not to mention the global supply chain change, where there has been increasing evidence that countries are now trying to regionalize their supply chain. So all of these, I think, come together to sort of present new challenges for China going forward.
So then let's break down the Chinese government's plans to sustain economic growth that was built in the face of the pandemic and the sectors it's really looking to shore up.
Right. So the first thing, of course, is the technology sector. I think the government has made it very clear that strategic technological development is their top priority. As we all know, the United States just blacklisted another 60 Chinese companies. So China has to develop technologies independently and maybe build on the regional supply chain strengths. And then second, of course, is to ensure that the public people are having their income, they're feeling safe and comfortable against spending. So this is to help the domestic demand growth. And that is very essential for China going forward because the global world is going to have a demand side shortage.
And I want to delve into some of the tech innovation that China wants to improve. Obviously, you have 5G, you have medical equipment coming to the forefront, and of course, artificial intelligence. What do we know about any sort of specific goals that China wants to reach over the next year or so?
Right. So in addition to above what you just said, I think big data, quantum computing, and also alternative energies, self-driving cars. Many of these are, I think, on the sort of the so-called strategic industries, strategic technologies. And so I think all of these are, important fronts where U.S., China, and many other countries are competing. And China has developed many strengths in 5G, in e-payments, etc. And so I think what the government wants to do is, on the one hand, to provide sufficient financing to continue to stimulate these technology development, and on the other hand, trying to provide more rigorous regulations, anti-monopoly, for example, to make sure that that there is no such thing called the so-called disorderly capital expansion, and also make sure these tech giants are going to focus on innovations instead of profit from market power.
And for people who might not know, we saw recently that China's officials proposed stricter antitrust restrictions and also just fined Alibaba and Tencent's units under anti-monopoly laws recently. So what exactly does that mean, and how is that added scrutiny likely to affect the expansion of some of these tech giants in China going forward?
Right, this is a great question. So I think the very specific rules are still to be seen, but I think this is a great move because, again, like I said, the objectives are twofold. One is to really make sure all these tech giants are going to focus on continuous innovations and technological development instead of profiting from the market power. And then second is really to make sure that we'll avoid any sort of major financial risks, as evidenced by the recent the person-to-person lending, the P2P lending, the 蛋壳, that big scandal. So I think it's a great move to achieve both goals.
And just very quickly, we have about 20 seconds. Obviously, the dual circulation plan, we've seen that come up time and again recently. Talk about the role of that in this latest agenda and really the importance of shoring up domestic consumption right now.
Right. Well, this is a great question, and I think it's very important for China to try to figure out. So the idea is that China is growing to an extent that it cannot just rely on external demand. It needs to look inward and make sure that domestic demand is going to be bolstered. And the major ways to achieve increasing domestic demand, one is job creation. We have 290 million immigrant workers and an estimated 9 million college graduates. We need to make sure that we create quality, high-paid jobs for all these workers, so then they'll be able to go out to spend. In addition to that, building social security, make sure income redistribution, and all these are very important to support domestic demand growth.